is it the board's position to wait until they're ready, to do that, and what is that going to look like? So this gets to a tough call. To me, it reminds me a lot of the Cabot Danville conversation,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that's what any principles to be gained out of this. That, as Dan was saying, are they ready? And if they're not ready, does that make it unpracticable because they haven't followed existing statute?
So
Sure.
I'm not that familiar with this situation. In other words, what 153 had, the last part of it was special ed transportation, all of that. And that's 8 years ago.
Yeah, it was, the special ed in particular was delayed under Act 156, so it gave people time, so give them a few more years there. Next time they were supposed to collect a bargain, they were
They
supposed
still
to.
haven't done
They still haven't centralized, yeah.
it. So do we have to look into that closely to determine the reasons?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the question, like Donna said, it's guidance, that was incorporated into Act 49. It's not meant to necessarily negate their Section 9 proposal, but for the board, the question is, would you be advancing the goals of Act 46 by forcing them to merge when they've demonstrated a lack of capacity to implement the prior aspects of the law relative to virtual merger?
And it's hard because it shows something is going on in that area that is lacking. And Mark was talking about leadership, that local leadership or, function, or something is happening to prevent that from being a fully functional SU. And what's happening on the ground level, and are they ready to take on the additional challenges of 46? And is that something to exempt them from or to push them further and faster? And that's where the board has to decide. So is it something that you're willing to give time more than 8 years? Or is it something that you think that should be done with more speed and deliverance? Yes.
My instinct is that we've got this just backwards. Remember that the considerations we're speaking about are kind of get out of jail free cards. And I can't imagine that you would want to issue such a card to a district which has willfully or out of incompetence or whatever been in violation of directives of the General Assembly for the last 8 years. That shouldn't be, it seems to me, grounds for saying, oh, they're there, you're not very capable, so you don't need to do this. Can't imagine that. So I think we just got it backwards.
That's what is being presented to us, though. Does that make it not practicable?
And I'm going to concur with John's point here, and we have to go back to the law, and the goal of the law here is to create sustainable governance structures. And I would argue that the challenges that this district has encountered are a result of an unsustainable governance structure. So the idea that what's being proposed here is to create a larger, more sustainable governance structure will hopefully provide an opportunity for some new leadership to come in and get things into a better place.
Mark and Stacey.
Stacey, did you want to go? Okay, I that's hard to disagree with, but once again, I think the greatest asset a community has is its people. Now we talk about indebtedness and that there's some kind of margin there that might disqualify some kind of merger, and I wonder if there's if the human element of that asset is missing, that leadership is missing, is it fair for whoever we merge them with?
And I think it comes even more because we just added Blue Mountain to that area. So they were entering a new SU because they were their own supervisory union and they were added to the supervisory union. So that adds a complicating factor. So this was the hard case. So if you're asking the SU to make changes, do you also incorporate Blue Mountain, who's already done that in their own?
Right.
So any principles to be gained?
I'm just going to, at the risk of over agreeing with Oliver and John, I'm going to agree with them on this one, that it does seem like it's just sending the wrong message to say that you're not complying with current law, so we're going to keep exempting you. I know they'll figure it out, and I think maybe we just have to push them a little bit. But it is a little, as a longtime government person, it just seems like that's the wrong message to send to a locality, is that if you don't do things right, we'll let you keep sliding. And it seems like that's what's happening in this particular school district. And I think that as far as a statewide plan, I don't think we should have an exemption for that.
Stacy?
I just wonder if we need to dig a little deeper into the why it's not happening, or what has transpired over that time. If it's a community that over 8 years has been looking for resources, met with the agency, has tried different opportunities, or they keep losing their principal or their super. Like, I think if we have a little more sense of the why, I could go either way. I think the other thing is we also just had a possible principle about a newly merged district will not be asked to accept new districts, was one of the possible principles. I wonder if there's like a correlated, a newly
Merged SU.
SU. Yeah, like is there some kind of corollary with Blue Mountain and that other principle that we just talked about?
Again, I think we have to make sure too, there are some things we can keep track of in our purview, but I am concerned about what's happening there. This process of listening to all the schools and districts and supervisory unions coming to us has really opened my eyes to some of the concerns that we have in this state and the reason we have Act 46. And there are some areas that I would like as a board, things that are in our purview, like education quality standards, to make sure that these are being met for those students, to make sure they have the opportunities. If these principles and laws are not being applied in these areas, and what does that mean for the students of those areas? And so there's almost a separate concern from this report, but what are we going to do for the governance? And then I think the long-term plan is what do we do with a board as what tools that we have. We're not the ones that can go and enforce those laws. That's not our purview, but we can do a lot more checking into school and reviewing the data and looking at that leadership turnover. I know there's been a lot of leadership turnover there. So we've seen.
I know I'm stepping a little bit outside of what we're talking about, but we've maybe identified an SU that's stepping outside of its responsibilities, and I believe the Agency of Education has the ability to step into that SU. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly.
And so once again, I understand the get out of jail free card, and trying to be fair to who we may merge a dysfunctional SU with. Maybe this is a case in of itself, and that we should consider keeping them the way they are and having the agency step in and do something so that they are more ready to merge. And of course, the agency would have to have enough money and personnel to be able to do this. And
So as we're sitting here in this particular building, in this district here, there's another principle that comes to mind, and I see a lot of similarities here. Because what's being proposed here is there's a K through 12 district, and then there's a 7 through 12 district, and they're both relatively small. And I think there's some concerns about sustainability and also about opportunities for students. And as we've learned from the earlier presentation here today, there were a lot of opportunities that the students have been able to take advantage of through some of the creative adjustments, and I think that this presents that as an opportunity. So I just want us to keep that in mind as a principle.
That one I should
So
add.
what is that? I mean, so what would you say the principle is?
That the merger creates an environment that would lead to greater opportunities for students.
Okay, so if we can add that to the list.
So
John?
no, that's not the same list. You're sort of, I think we're mixing apples and oranges
Okay,
here.
yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
What Oliver just described is a reason in support of bringing governance together. What the impracticable things are reasons why not to require it. So, and it's a useful list to begin, certainly, because what you could say is that there are obstacles on the one hand, but there are benefits or incentives on the other, and that we, in the end, need to be balancing those. So let's just differentiate between things that give us rationale in support of convergence and things which explain why convergence is impracticable.
So lastly,